This is UCF wide receiver Javon Baker.
Real routes from X receiver, could beat press man coverage, has a pretty fluid athletic ability on film. Had to transfer from Alabama to UCF, but at UCF led them in receiving in back-to-back years. Last season, 33% yardage share. Not an early declare. He didn't come from the biggest school, but I thought that there were some flash plays sprinkled across his tape.
Like you said, this past season at UCF, 52 catches, 1,139 yards, 7 touchdowns. To go into that a little bit more, I think he averaged 22 yards per catch, 7.2 yards after catch per reception. Just 17 of his targets this past season were 1 to 9 yards. That's 69 targets, 10 plus yards down the field. So these were kind of difficult ones that he had to fight for. Mm-hmm. And man, he fought for them with his 6'1", 202-pound frame. I think what really came in handy with him, Hayden, 71st percentile wingspan, and that's even bigger than that size. And you saw him use it constantly, especially in the red zone for touchdowns.
Yeah, he is kind of a contested catch guy. There's some like really sick one-handed grabs. There was one slant route where he completely plucked the ball up in the air and then actually turned his body up and back towards the sideline for a first down. So there's like some flashes of some really nice athletic traits coming from the hardest wide receiver position to find. So I don't want to overlook that. Now, you're talking about some of the yards after the catch numbers. Unfortunately, when I was watching this, there were 2 like 80-yard touchdowns where it's completely broken plays. So I think that he's like an outlier statistically with that type of stuff. That's not really his game. He can do it on occasion, but I think that he's needs to clean up some of his route running. I think there's some times where he's a little bit choppy. I didn't see like amazing burst. 4.54 in the 40-yard dash is 25th percentile weight adjusted. So not a bad athlete, but nothing exceptional. But I thought his ball tracking was good. His hands are really good as well. So I think it's like a little bit more of a work in progress, but I can at least see the path to being a starting NFL wide receiver.
Anyone that tuned into our wide receiver rankings video knows that Hayden and I are on opposite ends of the spectrum.
I'm ahead of consensus, both in dynasty and in consensus rankings by multiple spots. So I'm with you.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You can
in
have
top
him.
14, he wasn't in there. He was my wide receiver 10.
He's all yours.
And believe a major part of that is I differ from Hayden in the way that I believe he's like a downright rude route runner. Like, he would embarrass a lot of the corners that he was opposite from, either creating tons of separation with initial moves, sometimes beating them twice in double moves. And then on top of that, I thought he had very arrogant hands, really liked his releases, loved his body control in his breaks. And in fact, because what I talked about, that so many targets were 10 plus yards down the field, just 17 again from 1 to 9 yards, we didn't see a lot of those early breaking routes that I think he'll get even more at the NFL level, middle the field routes as well, because I think that factors into his strengths. And they were just using him as like a major big piece of the offense as the big play guy. And again, maybe the athleticism, the 69th percentile vert, 49th percentile broad jump, like you said, 4.54, 1.58, 10-yard split doesn't perfectly factor in as like one of the best deep threats in this class, because he's kind of viewed as a vertical player. Mm-hmm. I loved more his intermediate game. And I think that's the area he's really going to shine at the NFL level.
So I saw a lot of separation, both from his releases. I thought there was some bend on occasion there. And he's kind of one of these guys, I think a little bit of an overseller, which creates a ton of separation on some routes. And then some other routes where it seems like he's just not creating enough, because I think he's a little bit of an overseller. So I think we're gonna have to kind of refine that, figure out what works exactly. But yeah, some of the comps that you're talking about where you are kind of this physical X receiver type that kind of contested catches, like I think a high end comp for him would be like what Michael Gallup was doing. Romeo Doubs is kind of like a baseline comp for him, who plays big with the Packers out there, even though they're not like exceptionally large human beings. So yeah, I think this is like a classic round 3 guy that I think some teams will value. There was a couple drops that led to like truly like some of the most hilarious interceptions that you'll possibly see. Those are obviously outlier plays, but I think on occasion he can get a little bit out of control as well.
Going back to the yards after the catch, I think he has a little bit of dog in him. And that's what benefits the most after the catch. He's not someone who's going to be a Zay Flowers post catch, like square up to his opponent and make you miss in a phone booth. And then he's more of, hey, I am going to still turn around and face you, make one plant and then cut and see if I can break your arm tackle. I mean, I compared with Deontay Johnson, who, again, it kind of makes sense why you might not be totally in love with Javon Baker like I am. But I am with you in some ways. And hey, if we rein him in a little bit with this multiple movement stuff, we've seen this a lot with some prospects. Like you can just take in recent years, like Jerry Jeudy as an animated route runner and Garrett Wilson as an overly animated route runner. Wilson, more compact. I would say that his movements have purpose. Jerry Jeudy, still very animated, and it doesn't create a lot off of it. So I don't think he is the same route runner in terms of like, hey, body parts all over the place as those guys. I do think he kind of plays more contained to his frame, but we have seen, if you do have those concerns, it being reeled in with the ones that do go on to be consistent top class producers. Whereas the other ones still stick around, they aren't as consistent.
A little frustrating.
Yes.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Javon Baker is kind of a frustrating low end starter out there.
And Deontay is frustrating too, because it can be hit or miss. And again, it's to your point, as an ex guy who's 6'1", you have to win as a technical player like Deontay does. And then sometimes that can lead to thin margins and it going one way or the other.
Yeah, I think that Javon Baker plays more physical than Deontay, but I think that Deontay is just a little bit more fluid and has a little bit better of a path and kind of like pre-snap plan for what he's doing. So yeah, the production was rock solid, comes out 61st percentile in my model. I think that you're not going to find perfect prospects in round 3. So I'm still in on Javon Baker, just missed my cutoff on that top 14.
In another year, you might like him more.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. This is like, he's got enough speed. He's got enough size. He plays the hardest position on the field, could win downfield, which is a little bit harder to do than the underneath stuff. Like he has to earn all the production that he's getting. So yeah. And there's also like, there's been UCF wide receivers that have panned out. Gabe Davis is like not that dissimilar than Javon Baker in some aspects too.
And Baker was recruited to Alabama coming out of a high school that had 17,000 people in the town at large. Wow. After Alabama, he was recruited to Kentucky, had signed his letter or was close to it. And then they pulled his scholarship when they had a coaching change, I believe. And don't quote me on this. Believe that's when Liam Cohen left, who is now the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So then he reverted back to UCF. Yeah. Again, I think he wants to embarrass the player across from him. And that is like this mentality that he plays with, that he is a dog. And that can be, this is an awesome wide receiver class. That can still be difficult to find in this one. Like you legit see him point at his opposition even when the target doesn't go in his direction and be like, oh, I beat you on that one. Yeah. I'm about to do it again. Yeah. Love that. I can't get enough of that.
Yeah. And I've seen him block well. There definitely is a little bit of this taunting aspect that I definitely love from him. So yeah, there's something too. If Nick Saban thinks you are a good football player, that's always in the back of my head. So I think it'll be a fun prospect to kind of mold over the next couple of years. We'll see him in the preseason. We'll see if we can sneak him into 3 wide receiver sets out there. And if he hits, then I do think that maybe Deontay Johnson, like trying to get that much volume, is off the plate. But I think a version of that I can definitely see. So I would not be mad if my favorite team drafted Javon Baker somewhere in round 3.
Well, there are so many wide receivers in this class. That means you need to check out all of our videos on them. And the more of you that hit that subscribe button, the more videos we get to make. So smash it, hit the thumbs up before you get out of here, and we'll check you on the next one.